everyone. I'd like to welcome Dr. Darren Perrin, Head of Waste and Resource Management, Business Development and Growth at Ricardo Energy and Environment. Dr. Darren is a successful chartered waste manager with more than 20 years experience working in waste management. He's an experienced project director and project manager working with clients in both the public and private sectors across 4 continents. He has facilitated a number of strategic projects and helped local authorities and private sector to develop sustainable waste management practices. Thank you for joining us at the forum, Dr. Darren.
Thank you very much for the lovely introduction. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I want to talk to you today about from COVID emergency to climate emergency. Before I do, in terms of where I'm from, so I'm from Ricardo, where we've got a very clear vision where we want to create a world where everyone can live sustainably, trying to challenge and solve the world's most pressing energy and environmental challenges in a number of different areas. As global experts, we work across the globe with a number of offices with around 3,000 people working through 20 countries in a number of different technical areas: waste management, climate change, water, energy, and so on. So when we, one of the things a title today is COVID to climate emergency, but I want to just first of all look at what do we mean by climate emergency. An emergency is a serious, unexpected, and often dangerous situation requiring immediate action. So that's the definition of an emergency. When we say the word climate emergency, we kind of look at that and think, well, yes, it's serious. Yes, it's potentially a dangerous situation. And yes, it requires immediate action. Is it really unexpected? Has this really come out of the blue? So when we're actually putting it in more context of a climate emergency, the definition we use here is a climate emergency is a situation in which urgent action is required to reduce or halt climate change and avoid potentially irreversible environmental damage resulting from it. So with that in mind, we then say, well, what do we need to do? If it's about urgency, what can we learn? Now, to me, COVID has taught us a lot of things about ourselves. It's taught a lot about governments, about society, about the environment in which we live. And some of the key things it's taught us, some very positive things, but it's also taught us some very unexpected negative things, which we need to be aware of as we move towards this change. COVID has taught us the art of impossible. We all said, well, we can't use video conferencing, it's too difficult, we can't do conferences online. Yep, we're here today doing conferences online. We can't get out of our cars, we need to use our cars, yet all of a sudden, all came to a halt and we all survived. It's shown us what can be done. It showed us the speed of change, policies, new systems, new vaccines, all of these things just coming together through collaboration to make it happen because there was an urgency and a need to make it happen. It's shown the resilience of humanity and that together we can embrace in that technological change and different ways of working. And fundamentally, when we're talking around addressing climate change, around better waste management and circular economy, it's about a different way of working. We need to embrace that. So we've all said that's not possible before. Yeah, we'd like to, but it will take time. We've demonstrated we can do things quickly if we want to and if there's enough urgency. So if we are genuinely in a climate emergency, which I believe we are, then that requires immediate urgent action. Unfortunately, it's also shown us some of the negative sides. It's shown us some of the unexpected and nationalistic behaviours. People getting very closing their borders around looking after number one first. It's shown us that humanity is actually very fragile and vulnerable, and we're not invincible. And the key thing to me is that we're only as strong as the weakest link in the chain. The idea within the UK, for example, of masks right at the beginning with COVID was a classic of supply chain broke down, there's a link in it, and therefore everything else falls over until that link is really broken. So what are those links through our supply chain within waste management, and how strong and resilient are they? Ultimately from COVID, and when the various lockdowns occurred, we had an improved environment all over the news. Emissions dropped, blue skies in China, clear rivers, birds flying in cities. They were all there. We had a better environment. People saw the benefits of what we could achieve if we're doing things different in terms of how we run our lives. There's different terminology. There's within the market. So there's net zero, trying to find that balance of operations between the amount of carbon through our operations that we produce and those that we sequester out of the atmosphere, with clear agreement, the Paris Agreement, trying to bring global warming down by 2 degrees a year. It's now within our financial system. So looking through TCFD, Total Task Force for Climate Financial Disclosures, around having a really clear strategy to have stabilized markets and have we appropriately priced climate risk into the world economy. We have ESG and socially responsible investment, which is really starting to change the whole nature of financial risk. And the correlation between ESG and stock value is becoming quite stark, with a new evolving demographic shift of millennial generation who are actually demanding those environmental considerations. Lots of words in there, but ultimately, what does it mean to me? So what's your impact on the environment and the environment's impact on you? So what's the mitigation and what's your adaptation strategies? We have new increasing policy evolving frameworks, and we've heard about that earlier within some of the conference sessions. So we talk around the Green Deal, is that clear roadmap to boost the efficient use of resources by moving to a clean circular economy, stop climate change, revert biodiversity loss, and cut pollution. Clearly ambitious, achieving climate neutrality by 2050, but equally provides a clear roadmap of the investments and tools required to make that transition. And to qualify as some of those green investments, there's a really clear framework in that taxonomy around what businesses, companies need to be achieving in terms of their objectives to be seen as green. So what does this mean for waste? Well, it means for waste, we've moved and we've evolved into now systems-based thinking. We've moved from waste strategies, looking around how do you move materials around, what equipment, facilities you need. It's evolved up then through looking at how do we manage waste resources more effectively, to now around circular economy, which is around minimizing wastage and maximizing value. We've started to introduce net zero strategies around looking at carbon neutrality. How does that achieved? On the sidelines, we've got sustainability strategies, looking at longevity without impact. Collectively, though, those things come together as a systems-based approach. We start to no longer just look at waste and resource management or circular economy or net zero in isolation, but there's an actual overlap between all three of these things, which is around avoidance and minimize impact to provide mutual benefit. We start to work within an ecosystem of interconnectivity between water, energy, and materials in that collaboration to minimize wastage, not just waste. And this is an illustration of a project that we did with Lend-Lease on some master plan communities in Australia, looking really at how circular economy can be really embedded into new systems, looking at outputs becoming inputs, self-sufficiency, thinking differently on land use, products and distribution, power and energy, and the supply chains. Again, doing things different, going into a brave new world. And post-COVID, I think we are really in a situation where we can do things differently. So what needs to happen to develop and enable a circular economy? We need to change the way we do business. Technology and innovation is key to delivering that, as is sharing information and data through collaboration, through partnerships, knowledge, education, and right the way from the design and procurement to the end markets to make sure we recycle, recover the material and keep materials in long as possible in its productive life. We're in the plastic session, so it would be unfair of me not to talk about plastics. And I guess when we talk around plastic, some of the first things we see within the media when you talk about plastic to the public is turtles dying, birds' nests all full of nets, our beaches dirty with plastic. It's a very visible product and it looks as though it's a bad thing. And in some ways, some could argue, yes, it is. But actually plastic is a very good product as well. And we're having the wrong debate if we're talking around, is it plastic, is it glass, is it metal? Plastic is strong, it's durable, it's flexible, it's long lasting. That's why we use it so much. But it's also why it creates so many problems in the environment if it goes into our natural environment, because it stays there. It stays around for a long period of time. We use it a lot because it's cheap, it's reusable, it has a variety of uses. It's light, which is great when you're transporting it. And when we're talking around emissions and this systems-based thinking, you want to be transporting light-based materials. It's less fragile, so there's less chance of breakage, because if it breaks something, it's going to end up in waste. We've got hygienic packaging materials, and packaging is key to protecting the product itself. We can't just ban packaging. So plastic serves a really key role in how we deliver society, but it's how we use it. When I see things like plastic straw bans, we need to ban all plastic straws, I kind of look and think, why? Why do we need to ban plastic straws? The weight of that is insignificant. But the concept of plastic straws is quite important. But we now move to paper straws to replace. So we don't use paper straws in McDonald's, we use paper straws. But paper straws aren't necessarily always recyclable. Or we'll use a reusable aluminium straw, which uses a lot of energy to make the straw in the first place. The fundamental question we should be asking is, why do we need a straw? Do we really need that product? We can drink out of a glass of water. Perfectly fine, no need for a straw. We need to rethink how we do our business. So taking the conversation away from bans and material bans and what materials we should use in our products to asking the questions of why. One of the things I want to just share with you is when we look at the different hierarchies, we see there's very similar principles. So whether we're talking about an energy hierarchy, a waste hierarchy, or a carbon hierarchy, they all start with avoidance. They all focus on avoidance in the first place. So avoid using the energy, avoid generating the waste, avoid producing the carbon. They then all move down to, well, if it has to be used, then do so efficiently. And the third area is then, well, if the system efficiency can't be achieved, then try and seek some balance and some circularity within that system to keep it there as long as possible so that it doesn't then flow out and have its impact. With that in mind, it's really, really important then to realize if it's focusing on avoidance, what we're actually talking about is behavior change. But when we're talking around behavior change, we have a real challenge here. And we have the communication challenge, and we need to make sure we've learned from the lessons in the past. I've just come back off my holidays, and this is, as any waste manager does, takes pictures on their holidays of bins and rubbish. And this is one that I saw, it's fantastic, in Scarborough, of a fish, great big metal fish, which is to try and get the message of put your plastic bottles inside the fish to save our beaches, to present marine plastics, marine waste. But when you look at that, you see inside that fish is everything. There's cans, there's cardboard, there's plastic box. There is some plastic bottles, but there's a lot of contamination. It's really clear. Instructions of recycle your plastic bottles. There's instructions of why we need to do that. There's bins around this to put all of the rubbish, but yet people are still contaminating it. Why? And what's quite interesting is my wife actually pointed out to me a really simple point. Well, kids just want to put material in the fish, don't they? And there becomes the issue, as some of the challenges, is really understanding the value of why we're doing the behavior and that communication between parents and children and society so they understand fully how they need to behave. It isn't just about providing clear instructions and motivation. So there's a real challenge there that we need to overcome if all of our hierarchies are all focused on avoidance, which requires change in behavior, which requires us to do things fundamentally different, which is the premise of a circular economy and our systems-based approach. So we need to connect all of those dots. So when we're looking at behavior change and we look at behavioral models, the final behavioral models is we need to look at voluntary management. So I've used an example of water here. So water demand management is you tell people, so you tax it, you ban it. Supply management is around you constrain how much is used, like sprinklers. But voluntary management is people seeing the value in changing behavior. And that's ultimately where we want to get to, is buying into people seeing the value of why they need to change their behaviour. As we look through those different strategies of, well, let's decarbonise our waste, let's look at circular economy, well, where does plastic sit within that? We need to be taking plastics out of the feedstock for energy from waste. We know that. We need to target those carbon-intensive materials. But equally, plastics plays a role in optimising the logistics in terms of the efficiency of that transfer. So we need to think bigger picture. So my final thoughts is really 4 points. Is the environment is now becoming the centre of global economic policy. It's no longer an environmental agenda, it's an economic agenda. We need a systems-based approach to materials management, collectively bringing those things together. We need to understand and embrace behavioural change philosophy to overcome the inevitable associated challenges. And finally, plastics are not necessarily bad, but we need to think very differently and the opportunity to use that material correctly. Thank you very much for listening today.